John McMullen, 97.3 ESPN.com. Today, Doug Pederson says, I still stick with what I did on fourth downs, John. What is your take on Doug Pederson being over-aggressive yesterday? Was he?
Yes, he was, and I don't have a problem with it. I like the fact that Doug is aggressive in fourth down situations deep in the opposition territory. I think the numbers bear out that over a long period of time, it's a prudent way to go about things. However, when you lose a game by 5 points and you give up two pretty easy field goal attempts, you're going to get questions about it, and understandably so. But I think what Doug was trying to say today was, hey, if we executed these plays, we would have been in really, really good shape. And I tend to agree with him from a philosophical standpoint. If you look at the Carson Wentz sort of quarterback sweep, for instance, Jordan Matthews misses his chip block, and that sort of blows up that play. So would I prefer to run pass option? Yes, but I like the philosophy behind it. Obviously, it didn't work though. And
I'm not anti going for it, and I'm not the guy who says, "Hey, I don't mind that you went for it. I just don't like your play call." The reason I don't like going for it with this team is because I don't have a guy to go to. If you told me, "Hey, I'm going for it because I have Julio Jones," or "I'm going for it because I have Jason Witten in his prime," somebody that I trust, then I don't mind going for it. But this team doesn't have one of those guys. That's why I have a problem going for it. So it's not him being over-aggressive that gets me, or the play calls. It's I don't have the personnel. I don't have the right personnel for you to be aggressive.
Yeah, that's fair. I think it's becoming clearer and clearer to everybody each week. There's not a lot of playmakers on this team. But from Doug's perspective, the best playmaker is the quarterback, and he's got the football in his hands. And you're trying to make a play from that perspective, whether it was on the sweep or the zone read look, and it didn't work. It didn't work because the Eagles didn't execute. And, long term, you can argue that it cost them the game, but they had plenty of opportunities from that point forward. So I don't agree with that, but I do understand the criticism.
Yeah, all right, let's look at some other things here. I'm watching the game. Man, where do we start? This was an ugly game. The aggressiveness, they lose 6 points, 9 points if you want to count one that's blocked. He said last week that the one thing he regrets was he's got to stay aggressive. It was almost like that was ringing in his head when that game went on. Like, hey, I said last week I got to stay aggressive, so therefore I'm aggressive. And you look at Pederson and Andy Reid, cut from the same cloth. Is Pederson too stubborn?
Maybe. I think it was more of a mentality. I think the Eagles feel they're a better football team than the Giants, and I think they went in with that mentality from the coaching staff on down, the players' perspective. And I don't necessarily think if that's the New England Patriots out there or even the Oakland Raiders you mentioned from last night, how well they performed, the Dallas Cowboys obviously. I don't know if the strategy would have been the same. I think he had a lot of confidence that they could make plays on that particular defense, and they didn't get it done. So I don't think it was necessarily, hey, we were going to do this no matter what. I think the opponent had a lot to do with it.
John McMullen with us as we break down the Eagles and Giants game. John, one of the things I want to get into is their slow starts and the trouble from the start. And they've lost 4 out of their last 5 games. And if you look at the way the games have gone, at the Lions, they were down 14-0. They lose 24-23. Redskins down 14-0. They lose by a touchdown. At the Cowboys, 10-3. They lose in overtime. And then at the Giants, down 14-0. Why do you think these slow starts are happening, and what can Doug or the organization do to change it?
Well, they've been talking about Carson Wentz mechanics for a while. I think, you have a rookie quarterback who tends to make mistakes when he does make mistakes early in games. And I think particularly the first interception, when you see just the horrific footwork, you kind of understand how it happened. And, hey, that's something you got to work on. That's something that's only going to be cured for repetition, and there's obviously good and bad with it. The good part is a lot of quarterbacks, when they have starts like that, hey, they're off the rails for the rest of the game. I mean, they're done for the afternoon. Carson seems to have a mentality of a really, really good cornerback in that he forgets his mistakes and just goes out there and continues to play. And he nearly brought them back again. Now, that said, that's the good. The bad is you can't be down 14-0 in this league, obviously. As you mentioned, Pete, you get down 14-0, you scratch and claw, you outplay the other team for 3 quarters, you lose the football game because of 2 egregious mistakes early. So, hey, it's got to be cleaned up. There's no question about it. And it starts with a rookie quarterback, but we all should have known this was going to come at some point. I mean, rookies are going to struggle at times playing that position, especially when they don't have receivers, by the way.
Yeah, they don't have receivers, but the interceptions that took place, are those all on Wentz?
Yeah, the ones yesterday were, certainly. Those were bad passes. The second one was overthrown. The first one, as I said, was just that's just a terrible throw that can't be made at any point, no matter if you're a rookie, veteran, whatever. That's just not an NFL level throw, and that was completely correlated to just atrocious footwork. But he tends to be wild high early in games, and he tends to settle down from there. Hopefully he finds a way to fix it, because you can't be doing that and putting the defense behind the 8 ball with short fields. It would have been nice if they could have held the Giants to a field goal, at least on one of them, but that obviously didn't happen.
John, the last play, Pederson said it could have been a throw here. Matthew says, I got to make a play. I think they both are a little at fault, but, a more maybe athletic receiver, maybe a guy who's a little bit more of a playmaker makes that catch, or is that on Wentz?
A little bit of both, as you mentioned. I think a better receiver tracks the ball way earlier. He might get out there, he might catch it, but Carson kind of has to know who his receivers are at this point. And in that situation, on a 4th down play, you want to give your receiver a chance to make a play and let him drop the football if he's going to drop the football. So, yeah, I do think if that, for instance, is Odell Beckham, I think he tracks the ball earlier, he probably gets to it. And the Eagles probably won the game. But Philadelphia doesn't have a receiver like that. We've talked about it time and time again. It's just not the reality of the situation right now. And if you look at it, it looks worse from the quarterback's perspective because it didn't look that close, but it should have been a lot closer. It wasn't as bad of a throw as most people think it was.
John, of all the numbers that came out of that game and all the stats that came out of that game, the one that resonated the most with me was 3 for 15 on 3rd downs, 20%. It's such a problem for them. They're down to 30th in the league, ahead of only Baltimore and Jacksonville. And the Ravens and Jaguars, they fired their offensive coordinators. I don't think they're going to fire Frank Reich, but this 3rd down blues, it's like same song, different verse.
And remember, Frank Reich really isn't the offensive coordinator. When you have an offensive-minded head coach and Doug's calling the plays, he's really the coordinator. So that obviously falls on his shoulders more than anyone else. And, yeah, I mean, that all correlates back to not having great skilled people. Finally, they got Zach Ertz in the game. We saw Bryce Treggs being on the field, just his speed. The Eagles didn't throw the football down the field more than 20 yards once against Dallas. They did it 11 times against the Giants. And a lot of that had to do with the fact that Treggs was on the field. And he was only on the field for 15 plays because he can actually run, and you have to respect it. And so hopefully things will start to improve because you have those 2 aspects, Ertz back in it, Treggs on the field, in theory, a little bit more moving forward, which will loosen things up. But until they start converting, yeah, I mean, you're right to be concerned about it because they haven't been very good at converting 3rd downs.
you want to see some changes then at the receiver position because Treggs did have 20% of the snaps. You want to see less DGB, more Treggs, or do you have thoughts there at the receivers?
Well, I want to see Nelson Aguilar. I mean, whew,
boy, I said if it wasn't for all the other bizarre things that happened, Aguilar had a drop, then he actually caught one and then fumbled it. I said, can you imagine what's going through that kid's head right now? Man, they're going to hammer me with questions again.
Yeah, he is just mentally gone, and that's what it is. And I joked about it. Treg said, I think, what do you have, 69 yards receiving? Mm-hmm. In 15 plays, Nelson's played 21 games, has never had that many receiving yards. First-round pick.
Can I just tell you this? After each game, the Eagles send us the play calls from the radio, from Merrill Reese and Mike Quick. And they describe each play so that you can know what it is. It's, Ertz 15-yard catch, and they name it. This one is Eagles 11:06:16 EAG34.wave. That's the wave file. And the name on it is Aguilar actually catches one.
That's fantastic.
He did, and that's the thing. I assume that was the catch, I think, for 17 yards. And he did make a good catch. His hands were out in front of his body, snatched it out of the air. And you just say to yourself, where is that? Where is the consistency? We talk about Jordan Matthews failing to track the ball. We see Nelson is just terrible tracking the football in the air. You mentioned the fumble, which thankfully he got back. It's just a guy who is struggling mentally, and as bad things happen, that's what I mentioned with Carson Wentz before. Carson has this ability to just forget about it. It's just, you can see it just weighs on Nelson. As soon as he makes a mistake, you can chalk up. He's gonna make two more. And yesterday he was on the field more than Matthews. He had the most reps of any Eagles receiver. I don't see, as poorly as Dorial Green-Beckham played, and he was terrible too, and he might be the least physical 240-pound receiver in the history of football. He gets beat up by 180-pound corners. You got to get Nelson Aguilar off the field.
There's not a lot of options out there. John McMullen's with us here. I'm watching. You're there, okay? I see Giants in cover 2 all damn day. The Eagles just refuse to run the ball against that. You got to run to get them out of that, right? I mean, isn't that the way you get a team out of a cover 2? You got to run the ball. It's 7-on-7. You got to run.
Yeah, in theory. But remember, that's where getting behind 14-0 kills you. And hey, I mean, we have a large sample size of understanding at this point. And forget about Andy Reid. I know people will go back and say Andy's love of the passing game, so they assume Doug will love it. But you don't even have to go back to Andy. The reality is the Eagles pass the ball under Doug Pederson way more than they run the ball. And part of that has to do with they don't have a number one running back. Doug finally admitted today it was Darren Sproles. I don't know why it took him this long. But they don't have a guy who can carry it 25 times, even if they wanted to. And I'm not saying they do, but yesterday wouldn't have been that game because once you're down 14-0, that's where the flow of the game takes over. And, hey, you're down 2 touchdowns. You got to start throwing the ball to catch up.
John, yesterday, Leotis McKelvin said after the game he admitted that he wasn't completely recovered from a hamstring injury that caused him to miss most of the first 6 games. If that's the case, do they need to make some changes there? C.J. Smith, let's see what he has. Jalen Mills, throw him in there more. I mean, if he's not 100%, and by the way, he also said that he didn't think he was getting targeted, which Mike and I both are like, well, what game was he playing in? I mean, come on, they were going after.
Yeah, all 3 touchdowns were on Leotis McKelvin in the first half. Obviously, the second one where McKelvin and Jalen Watkins sort of ran into each other like the Keystone Cops. But, yeah, I mean, he played a very poor game. Problem is the corners, very, very similar defensively to wide receivers. Who else do you go to? They did sit Leotis for a while in the second quarter and put Jalen Mills in there. But the only reason his numbers weren't as bad is because there was a drop, an OBJ drop, and an overthrow where he was completely beaten. That would have been a touchdown by Eli Manning. So they don't have a lot of bodies at the cornerback position similar to the wide receiver position. And, yeah, can you throw C.J. Smith out there and cross your fingers? You can, but I don't think he's as good as Jalen Mills, and Jalen's not getting it done right now.
Right, or Leotis with a 85% hamstring at that. Now, John, the defensive line, 1 sack in the entire game. How does the defensive line disappear?
Well, I don't think they disappeared. In fact, Fletcher played a really, really good game. Brandon Graham, as usual, played a good game. Eli Manning doesn't get sacked. He's going to get rid of the football. And we joked in the press box, the over-under on intentional grounding calls not flagged, because Eli's known for it. He'll just throw it into the ground. I mean, he's known for his quick release to begin with. And if the pass rush is coming, he will just speed it up even more. He's not a guy you're going to sack a lot. So the Eagles knew that coming into the game. It wasn't about piling up sacks. It's just about getting him off the spot, making him speed things up, and making him throw the ball before he's comfortable. For the most part, they did a decent job, but again, it's not good enough. And that's Jim Schwartz will talk about it week in and week out. Hey, we lost the football game, so it's not good enough.
Overall, just a disappointing day. And look, the Giants came out. Collins had an interception. He's been playing really well, and he was a guy that was knocked coming out of college that he couldn't cover. Even last year as a rookie, he was getting targeted. A guy that people thought you could go after. He gets the interception early. They get another interception on the next possession. They put points on the board. You got to give them credit that they turned the turnovers into 6. And the Eagles were unable to do that. Their opportunities were for 3. They didn't even get them because they went for it on 4th down. So you got to give the Giants some credit that they were able to turn those 2 turnover Eagles, and the Eagles really didn't turn their turnovers into big points. And that was really they get the Hicks one late in the game. You had the one from Nolan Carroll, and I thought really in the end that's a difference in the game. They turned their 2 turnovers into 14 points. John.
Yeah, it is, and as we said, we had a chance for the 3rd miracle in the Meadowlands with that Jordan Hicks interception, which was a brilliant play, tipped at the line of scrimmage by Connor, and then you just don't see middle linebackers who are that athletic. So the Eagles had every opportunity to come back, and as I said, for the majority of this game, for the last 3 quarters, they were the better football team. But this has been a theme. They have had the football with an opportunity to win the game on the road, and they haven't been able to get it done. And as that continues to be a theme, the pressure is just going to grow and grow and grow until they finally break through. And it's a lot of reasons. You guys were talking about why people aren't watching the NFL before I came on, and gave so many reasons. Jack McCaffrey said, hey, there's so many reasons the Eagles' offense isn't succeeding. The quarterback just to tick off. The receivers can't get separation. There's no running game. The offensive line we didn't even talk about. They were pretty clean. Vaitai was good enough to win with. But there's something every single week, and it's just one of those hurdles they got to get over.
All right, Jonathan, tomorrow we'll have plenty more on the NFL as we are at the midway point. 8 games in, Eagles 4-4. What did we learn? We'll talk about it tomorrow here on the Sports Bash 97.3 when John joins us in studio. Thanks, John.
Hey, thanks, guys.